So, Marcel and Mark, thanks very much for coming for this fireside chat. I'm fascinated by both of these groups because I've seen them popping up on Facebook, and I've known about Men's Shed for about 4 years. I was trying to find somebody with a Men's Shed for a piece I was doing 4 years ago. Struggled. So I'm now glad that you guys are here. So let's start off with just background on what both of these projects are. Marcel, what is Men's Shed?
Thank you. Men's Shed is a space, usually a shed. Sometimes it's simply a garden shed in someone's garden, but it's a place where men can gather and fix things and make things and probably break things as well, but drink tea.
Lots of tea.
Absolutely. Coffee is available as well, as I must be
We don't
prompted.
discriminate against hot beverages.
As a project, the whole concept came out of Australia from about 2005. And it came out of a background of people shedding together, just getting together in towns and what have you. But it took a few people to say, well, this is a common thing. Let's start connecting the sheds together and actually do something with it. So by about 2007, they started formulating the Australian Men's Shed Association. Now they've got about 1,000 sheds across Australia. There's over 400 in the UK. And they're opening in the UK something like, I think it's 6 every month. So it's moving really rapidly in the UK at the moment.
Just a quick one as well. Where is Guernsey's Men's Shed?
Well, I think the word nascent Men's Shed might be appropriate. We were inspired this time last year by Patrick Abrams, who came from the Froome Shed in the UK and spoke at last year's Thrive conference. I'm part of the Makerspace move over here, so everything he said just resonated with me about getting people together in a shed to make, mend, repair, do stuff, but with a particular angle on reaching men, and particularly retired men who get out of the workplace and slump in an armchair and watch daytime TV.
We've all been there.
It's a terrible way to go. So we are currently renovating some sheds. So it was inspired this time last year. By about January of this year, we were offered some sheds, some big packing sheds, and we are currently in the process of renovating them. In fact, even as I speak, there might be the roofing materials being delivered on site. So if there's any roofers in the audience...
Breaking news right here,
guys.
Breaking news. So yes, if it's about to say something to muck in on, and I'm sure Marcel would love your help. Now, Mark, RISE. Tell me what RISE is, what it stands for as well. I know it's an acronym.
Before the acronym, so it's a peer support network for recovering addicts, basically, which grew out of a course paid for by DAS, the Drug and Alcohol Strategy, where a range of people were sent on, which was run by a guy called Peter Sheath from Emerging Futures. He's UK-based. And he generally goes around the world trying to help set up a peer support network for recovering addicts, which I am myself. And I moved back to Guernsey 2.5 years ago after my last rehab. I've used drugs for 25 years. For 10 years, I was a heroin addict. And, I decided I had to make certain changes. I came back here knowing that I couldn't get hold of what I was using all the time in the UK. Coming back here, I accessed Drug Concern. I met people like Greg, and DAS paid for this course, etc. And some of us have decided, since doing the course, to set up a new peer support network, basically.
Fantastic. Just evidence, again, of people having ideas, coming forward with them, and then bringing forward. I mean, how many people are coming along to this now?
Well, addicts are the most reliable people, right? It started well, and recently I think we've realised that we've got issues around advertising. Funding's an issue. We haven't got charity status. Further down the line, that's what we're looking at. The 5 of us that run the committee often see each other and help each other out in all sorts of ways. So I mean, it's very
helpful
small
in
at the
itself
moment.
for that as
We
well.
only launched it in June.
Yeah.
So you know, it's new beginnings. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I suppose what I want to know is, what have you taken from these last few speeches you've seen? What did you make of them?
I mean, I was particularly struck by Mark's idea about dialogue, because that's something which has interested me for a long time. Particularly a writer called Paulo Freire, who is big on the education scene, and he talks about dialogue and the importance of dialogue. And I think the importance of a peer support network is that it's all about dialogue. It's not monologic. It's not didactic. It's not prescriptive. I think peers can speak to other addicts, if you like, in ways that professionals can't, because, as Mark said, experience counts for a lot.
Mark, I mean, it takes a lot of bravery to talk about what you've just spoken about. I mean, how hard was it for you at the start to have those dialogues with, as I say, not just professionals, but people who may have been in the same situation?
I've always been a bit of a talker myself. So,
that's good. We've got 12 minutes.
I've never actually been too afraid of talking, but I think, and what I really found difficult was society's view of yourself as an addict, particularly a heroin addict. Heroin's a really scary word for most people, and not only that, what people see on TV isn't really the truth. It's a lot more complex than that. So for me, the isolation that you experience as an addict is because you can't have those dialogues openly, because you're going to feel judged. There's a lot of prejudice around it. Once somebody finds out you're a heroin addict, are they going to employ you? Maybe they think you're going to rob the till. I mean, these are classic cliches. Sure, there are individuals that act like that, but there's a lot that don't. And so for me, it's really important to start trying to dispel the myths of addicts.
I mean, as you say, you've got your 5 committee members on this RISE group, and I mean, as you say, has it been beneficial for just those 5 people being in a room together, we're talking to each other? Yeah,
well, exactly, yeah, for sure. I mean, at the beginning there was about 16 of us. It's filtered down, which to some extent has made it easier to work together, too many cooks and all that. But it's interesting, the similarities, between addicts. Going back to, I can't remember the girl's name that was speaking first here, but talking about the adverse childhood experiences. How many people have similar experiences like that? For a long time, my using was about, I was telling myself that I was challenging the status quo. I wanted to be a rebel, I studied art and philosophy. It's all about, challenging those things.
Yeah.
It turns out over years maybe that wasn't quite the reasons behind it. And you tend to find that whether you're gambling, whether you're self-harming, whether you've got an eating disorder, that actually is a lot of commonalities that base themselves around those types of experiences. So a lot of us have those. Even we have people who aren't addicts in a classic sense, who also go through those things. But why one person may go down the drug route or the gambling route and another doesn't? I mean, that's open to question, isn't it? But it's amazing, being able to have these open dialogues with people.
Well, we've got 3 men on stage here, and men, as we've seen in some of these talks, we're not brilliant at opening up to each other, and I really appreciate you doing that, Mark. But I mean, how, Marcel, with the men's shed space and the team you've got together, has it been quite good for the people involved as well? Has it been quite a cathartic experience, getting together, doing these things, and having a dialogue about tough subjects?
Yeah, totally. I'll be honest and say the building project and renovation side of it is really frustrating, because we all want to be in there making stuff and doing our own projects and such. But actually, instead, we've gathered a team who are working on the building. We're a bunch of amateurs, and we're doing it voluntarily in our spare time. And
That's how the best things happen.
We're muddling along. And whilst we're balancing this frustration, we're countering that with, well, the journey is part of it. So the relationships that have come out of that.
I hope you're filming this. It sounds, sounds like it could make a great documentary at the end of this.
Documentary or movie?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Think big.
We need some drama.
I feel a men's shed calendar coming on.
How many people here would buy it? We've got some hands back there. Definitely some hands. Right, we're in. Right, here we go. There's one project that's going to be launched. This, the Men's Shed calendar.
Me and my big mouth.
I mean, it's a must-have Christmas present, I've heard.
But yeah, actually, the journey of being together, it was on one of the sort of very more businessy meetings when we're setting up bank accounts and charitable, registration, all that sort of stuff. And one of the guys came along to the meeting and sort of just started offloading to someone about a bereavement that he was just quite close to, and it was just difficult. And then after sort of 10 minutes of only a few people being involved in the conversation, the question was, well, let's get down to business. But in reality, that was business. That was very real, and he needed that support. We've made it a tradition that we have bacon butties on a Saturday lunchtime.
Very good.
So anybody locally and worldwide, if you're passing through Guernsey any time, up St Peter's Way, come and claim a bacon butty at about 12:30ish.
I live in the forest. That's just down the road.
Absolutely. Come up on your pushang.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's a great time just to stop what we're doing and just grab a bacon butty together and just talk about either what you're working on or other things. And things come up. The quote that comes out of Men's Shed in Australia was that men don't find it easy to talk face to face, but they do talk shoulder to shoulder. And it's out of those relationships of doing something together that men share, and they talk and they open up.
Question for both of you, that actually you've made a good point, the shoulder to shoulder instead of face to face. Do you find it easier to share difficult experiences when it's one-on-one or when there's a group of you? I always find actually when it's a group like with my football team or something like that, I can, because everybody will chip in and you feel like you've got more of a support network, whereas one-on-one I just start crying and it's all a bit of a mess.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's
okay.
What my girlfriend says. So would you say it's easier as a group?
I think everyone's different. And depending on what you're talking about will be different. There'll be some things that I would rather just talk through, confide in one person, and that's just something that we can share. But there's other things which actually you share with the group, and there's a commonality of men's experience. And everyone nods and goes, yeah, actually, I get that same problem.
I've got one of those. Let me check now.
You want to see my scar?
Yeah, that's better than that.
Yeah.
I suppose one thing you mentioned as well is something you said about Rise, how you want to get charitable status. But you've got charitable status.
Yeah.
How did you go about doing that? I mean, can share some experience there? I know it's a bit nuts and boltsy.
It is nuts and boltsy, and it's one of those things that's really useful to get through.
Yeah.
But I think it comes down to having a group of people. It's not my forte, wading through documentation. So one of our other guys waded through some of that and presented us, we need to do this. Do we go for a non-profit organisation? Do we go for charitable? Oh, actually, for what we're doing with Makerspace, that needs to be non-profit. Actually, what we're doing with Men's Shed needs to be charitable. Yeah, and someone else has kind of done the reading for me.
The advantages.
And I can agree. And if that's a recommendation to you, find a couple of people who kind of know the score with all of that, and just ask them to help you through it.
And I suppose that's the same. That's the same for anybody in here who's thinking of setting up a charitable organisation. I've spoken to a few people who are doing that at the moment. So I mean, Rise. Where do you see it going in the future? Then, what do you want it to be? Open-ended question there.
Up.
Rise up.
Yeah, I think for me, the peer support network is formalising what people can do informally every day. So for me, what we do in our group meetings, I feel like I do when I'm in the pub talking to people. And I have people that I speak to in the pub who don't want to come to a formalised meeting, but I'll spend time with them at their house or in the pub, and we'll talk through stuff. And so wouldn't it be great if formally it grew and people informally take away you know, to quote Mark, you know, that idea of open dialogue, explore each other, ask questions of each other. I always think it's interesting when people talk with each other, how often somebody actually asks somebody a question, an exploratory question, you know, a personal question, and how often people feel comfortable responding to that. If that was common currency, if people did that on a regular basis without feeling like they may offend somebody or etc., perhaps you know, open dialogue would become something far more common in life, you know, in families, etc. Yeah. So if it was to ripple out in a social sense, I think, you know, that's how I would sort of want to see it developing. Yeah.
Well, good luck. Good luck. And Marcel, you were here last year. Yep. And you got the idea from this conference. What would be your advice to people in the audience who have had an idea today? Maybe they've heard from Wendy about, you know, 10 minutes of exercise and they want to do something like that, or that, you know, they've had another the daily mile, and they want to go and do that. What would you say to people out there who've been inspired and want to make something of it?
I think for people who are here, network with other people and connect with other people who are thinking the same as you. And some people will gel with you or will have the time available to rock on with you. Some people won't, some people will. Don't worry, pick up the ones that do and try and do something. One of the missions of this whole thing is to stimulate people into doing something positive. The last year's talk from Patrick Abrams about Men's Shed really galvanised me, but it stimulated a couple of key other people. There were probably 4 or 5 people at the end that got into discussion about it, but a couple of people who've stuck and have really motored it forward, joined the team, and, you know, we're motoring forward. So just keep making connections, and for people who are watching online or wherever you are, just try and network to other people. Try and find like-minded people in your area that you can buddy up with and rub each other up. And start doing something, even if it's small. It doesn't have to be this grandiose, finished plan yet, but start something, do something.
You've just got the roof arriving. I mean, you know, it's still a plan in progress, isn't it?
Very much so, yeah.
Are you excited for when it, well, I suppose, is it ever finished? I don't know.
No, it won't ever be finished because the real work is the people. The shed might get finished. Might get finished. But actually, even though Guernsey is only 25 square miles and 60,000 people, we've got a vision to be planting out sheds around the island. So it's the Guernsey mentality.
St. Peter's shed, you want a north shed, don't you? I mean, the southerners won't want to go to the north shed. The northerners won't want to go to the south shed.
All the way down there, yeah.
It's a long way. You've got to cross the Breda Valley.
That's a Guernsey thing, yeah. But yeah, so we want to plant out so that actually just down the road there is a shed that you can go to. And they might be slanted in particular ways. There might be a more mechanical shed. There might be a more woodworky shed, and that's cool. People can pick and choose as to what their forte is going to be.
Well, fantastic. Thank you very much, Marcel and Mark. I really appreciate it. And I want them to give you can't get my words out. Can you give them a big round of applause for coming on?
Thank you. Thanks.
Good job.